Hello friends, and welcome back to the Mothership. Today we're going to be making up our very own Texas-style kielbasas from start to finish. Let's get started. What I have here is a pork butt and some brisket trimmings. Now this pork butt is about 3.5 pounds, and our brisket trimmings are about almost 2 pounds. The trimmings for this brisket, as you can see, is mostly meat. There's a little bit of fat in there, but I think I rendered out most of the fat to make tallow, so it's mostly meat from this piece. What I want is about 5 pounds total, and I want to have that mostly be coming from the pork, so I'm going to do about 3 pounds pork, 2 pounds brisket. And I want to get as much of the fat to actually be coming from the pork versus the brisket, mostly because pork fat actually just tastes better in sausage than beef fat. But what we want to do is cut it into cubes big enough to fit into my grinder. Something like this strip would probably work just fine. So this is my goal. I'm just going to cut all this up, get about 5 pound ratio. And boom, there we go. Cubed up pieces of pork butt and brisket. What I'm going to do is put this into the freezer. I want to get as close to freezing as possible because that just really helps with the grind. So into the freezer we go. At this point, you should also put all of your metal components of your grinder into the freezer as well. So your auger, your blade, and the little grinder that goes on the end, all that should go into the freezer at this point. And we'll come back when these have gotten close to freezing, and we'll move on with actually grinding up our meat. So to get our seasoning together, first it's important to note that in the sausage making world, they tend to do a lot of recipes by weight. So instead of using like teaspoon and cup, a lot of times it goes by weight of the total sausage making amount. So if you're doing 5 pounds, it'll have X amount percentage, and you can scale that up or down based on how much sausage you're gonna make. For salt, in this case, in general, it's around 1.5% of weight to 2% of weight. Now we have 5 pounds of meat, so that's 2,280 grams. 1.5% of that to 2% of that is probably around 40 grams worth of salt, which is the amount that I have here. And I will do a quick calculation of teaspoons for you guys if you don't have a scale. I am using Diamond Kosher Crystal Salt. And in this case, 40 grams equates to about 10.5 teaspoons, which is a little over 3 tablespoons. This recipe is also going to use pink curing salt number 1. And in this case, also by weight, we want to do about 5 to 6 grams, which is about a teaspoon. Then I'm going to do 2 tablespoons or about 17 grams of paprika. For a binder, I'm actually going to go with milk fat. I'm going to do 1/3 cup of milk fat. It's worth noting that a lot of people don't use milk fat, or they don't use any binder at all, or they use a heck of a lot more than this. I found that in some cases you need it, some cases you don't. We have a decent amount of fat in here, so I don't think we're going to need it. But we have about 1/3 cup anyways, just to be safe. And last but not least, I'm going to do black pepper, about 10 grams, which is a tablespoon. Now at this point, we've got our dry seasonings together. For the garlic, I'm actually going to throw fresh cloves in with my grind, so I don't need to include any garlic powder here. I'm just going to set this aside after it's completely mixed up, and then we're going to wait for our meat to continue getting close to that freezing point before we can start to grind it. The meat and the grinder are nice and chilly, so it's time to begin grinding this thing. I'm going to just start throwing in pieces of pork, pieces of beef, kind of mix it up as I'm feeding it, and then toss in these garlic cloves just to get it all grinded up and dispersed. We are going to mix it afterwards, but it's easier to just start doing it now. Everything is run through the grinder twice, and to get those last couple bits, I put a couple ice cubes through. Now what we are going to do is mix in all of our seasoning. And then for our moisture, I'm going to add in about 1/3 cup of beer. Now really any liquid will do. I chose a lager because, you know, it's almost Oktoberfest and I don't want to impart too much flavor. I would stay away from using like an IPA or even a stout unless you're looking for that flavor profile specifically, because it will be a little bit overpowering. But as far as mixing, just keep on mixing. This is all we're going to do until it starts to really stick together. If you need a little more moisture, feel free to add in some water or some more beer. But we're just looking for it to get nice and tacky and have all the seasoning distributed evenly throughout the meat mixture. Now you are done when it starts to get to that right level of stickiness. For me, there's a couple of different ways to see that. One, the fat really starts to smear around. That's a good indicator. That's usually the #1 indicator. But I'm using gloves with liners because it's cold. And when it starts to really pull my the gloves off from the liner, that's another indication that you're probably about done. This right here, I think that'll do. It sticks. It does fall off eventually, but it sticks for a couple seconds. So this is ready to get put into our casings. Gonna completely fill up our sausage stuffer here without getting any air bubbles. And I'm gonna get my casing on. I'm using these new fancy smancy casings that have this little condom, for lack of a better word, on here. Now, of course, I didn't have my camera on for the first half of these, but what I am doing is, instead of going with one long link and then cutting them into pieces like I usually do, I plan to cold smoke these, so I need to have them in a size that will fit into my grill, which is where I'm going to put my smoke tube. So I'm going to go with the hanging method, which basically means we're going to take them, we're going to tie them off and tie them into a nice little C like this, put a hook on them, and that'll allow me to hang them right there in the grill, or if you have a smoke box, that works too. So you can see I've got a nice little amount right here. Snip it, making sure I leave a lot of space. Give it a nice little roly-poly. Unfortunately, there's an air sac, so I'm going to have to do that again. Obviously, like with all sausage, the trick is to not have a bunch of air at the end. In my experience, it's almost always going to happen, so I almost always have to prick them with a toothpick. But just going to tie these off on both ends. And then I'm going to take the ends here and tie them together. And then I'm going to tie them together a couple of times because sometimes these casings are a little slippery and they tend to fall apart, and I don't want them to fall when they're hanging up to smoke. See? Perfect. I've already done, let's see, this is my 5th one, and we're probably a little more than halfway through. So I'm just going to keep going, get all these finished up. There we have it. 7 nice plump sausages. I did poke a couple of holes in some of the larger air pockets just to get them to adhere a little bit better because I am an amateur at this, guys, not a professional. But these are looking really good to me, so what they're going to do now is sit on this wire rack in the fridge overnight to really let that cure do its thing to completely cure them out and let the exterior of the casing really adhere to the sausage itself, get us that nice, really good crunch. So yeah, let's work on our snap and work on our cure and leave these suckers in the fridge overnight. And God bless you if you're cleaning like I am, because I hate making sausage only because it takes me forever to clean up all the equipment. Our beautiful sausages have been in the fridge overnight. You can see there's a little more red coloring. I did put paprika in here, so it wouldn't be as noticeable just because there was already red going on. But they are cured at this point. So now what we're going to do is give them a nice cold smoke. To get our cold smoke done, I'm going to utilize one of these, a smoker tube. Basically, I have it filled up with pellets. I'm going to get it lit and get everything into my propane grill with the grates and the burners removed. I'm going to hang them from my top rack using a S-clip, and I'll show you what that looks like. Since I went with the little C shape, you can see it worked out perfectly. We have just enough space for these suckers to not be touching the bottom, and they are completely apart from each other. You could probably have done another 2.5 pounds on here and fit them in between. But what I'm going to do is take our fire tube, and it's going to sit right here. Obviously, I got to light it and all that, but this is basically the setup I'm going to do. And I'm just going to let it cook just like that. And by cook, I mean cold smoke for about, I don't know, 4 hours. These have been smoking, cold smoking for about 4 hours. Color's looking really good on these, and I think it's time for me to actually smoke them off. So I'm going to transfer these over to my pellet smoker at about 180 degrees and cook them to about 150 degrees to internal. What that's going to do is finish up the cooking, get these things ready to freeze if you want them to, or you can eat them right then. But we're going to cook them off now. Like I said, 180 degrees, throw them onto the smoker. Just so you can see what we're doing, top rack, I have them all sitting out there. I try to get them as close apart as I can just to get as much smoke penetration all over there. And I'm going to run these, I'm not sure, maybe an hour and a half, but the point is to get them to about 150. At that point, I'm going to pull them and directly into an ice bath. Side note, if you couldn't tell, I did a little rearranging back here. So you get to look at this nice fence, and before you got to look at a nice brick wall. But I got a lot more space, so I'm actually pretty pleased with the new setup. 15 to 20 minutes later, our sausages are finished with their ice bath. Now the ice bath does a couple of things. Number one, it stops that cooking process so they don't keep cooking. Number two, it shrinks the casing onto the meat, gets them nice and firm. These are great. And then number three, it kind of cleans them off a little bit. At this point, these sausages, most of them are probably going to get vacuum sealed and I'll eat them later. You could also just eat them cold if you really wanted to, or you can put them on the grill and heat them up real quick, which is probably what I'm gonna end up doing. But if you're looking, they are nice and red. They are very plump, nice and firm. They're looking absolutely fantastic. But you guys are here to see what they look like on the inside, right? And I want to eat some, so let's heat 1 or 2 of them up. Alrighty guys, before we get to the part where I taste test these suckers, I mean, just look how beautiful they are. I need you guys to do me a favor. I need you to hit that subscription button. I need you to comment. I need you to like. I need you to hit that bell. And most importantly, I need you guys to stick around for more cooks. This looks delicious. I want to chomp into this. Let's get to that part right now. So the color on these suckers is just incredible. Beautiful red, and they are very, very thick casing here. So I think we need to cut off a couple of pieces and give it the old taste test. So let me show you what we're working with here. These are nice and delicious looking, very plump, very thick, and good color to them, absolutely. Some of that is the paprika, a lot of that is probably the cure, but it's time to give them the good old-fashioned chomp. So let's give it a go. This is such a good starting point for sausage, guys, if this is your first time. It is very delicious on its own, but you could start to add in all kinds of stuff. You could add in onions, you could add in hot stuff like cayenne peppers, poblano peppers, whatever you want. You could add in cheeses, you could add in chili, you can add in anything you want. This is a good starting point, but this is my favorite way to just make sausage on its own. And I like to eat it just with sour cream. Peppers and onions are great, put them on a sandwich, put them just on a barbecue plate, but this is the way I like to do it. There's a nice crisp to it, and we put it into that ice bath after we smoked them down. It really tightened up the casing all around. Really fantastic. And I can't eat enough of them, guys. This is a great sausage. We're gonna really enjoy this one tonight. Still very juicy. Brisket and pork butt together, really good combination. Guys, if you enjoyed this, I'm gonna do more sausage videos in the future. I just hate cleaning the equipment. It's really a pain in my butt, but you know what? I'll do it for you guys. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a comment. Let me know how you'd like to do your sausage, and if you give this one a try, let me know what your thoughts are. Thank you guys for sticking around, and as always, cook something absolutely fantastic. I'll catch you on the next cook. Oh shoot, I forgot people like to see a good snap. Worth it.